Soos genoem gesels ek vanoggend met professor Vinesh Maharaj en hy is die Adjunkdekaan van Navorsing en Nagraadse Onderwys by UP se Fakulteit Natuur en Landbouwetenskappe. Professor, welcome to Groot Plaas.
Good afternoon, Mia, and to your viewers as well.
Let's start at the beginning. This study, we've got quite some time this morning to talk about this intensively because this is quite important. What did you find with this study?
So, Mia, let me first start with regard to why we did the work.
Yes.
So one of the reasons, or the main reasons we undertook this research is, and as many of your viewers would actually know, that South Africa is very rich in its plant biodiversity. In fact, we are regarded as the third highest biodiversity in the world.
Yes.
And that's quite incredible regarding the fact that we only occupy less than 1% of land space. So that gives us lots of potential in terms of how we can utilize our biodiversity.
Absolutely.
Also, if you just consider in terms of what biodiversity and natural products has contributed to the healing of mankind and treatment of diseases. So at least 50% of your medicines are derived from what you call a biological or a genetic resource. And in fact, every time a doctor writes a prescription, 1 in 4 is actually sourced from a plant.
Sure.
So the potential of using plants as a source of medicines to treat diseases is very high. And that is actually the rationale as to why we undertook the work to discover this ingredient that can be used for the treatment of malaria, and in fact, may possibly be used to eradicate the disease.
Would you say this is quite groundbreaking? I mean, especially in your field, we know that malaria, it's a big headache, and in the world, in South Africa, would you call this groundbreaking?
So if you look at the number one killer, especially in Africa and parts of the world as well, it still is malaria, especially in terms of mortality and number of deaths, especially around children as well. And so while there are treatments out there for malaria, so some of the main treatments for malaria, in fact, are derived from plants. You may know of chloroquine, which comes from the chichona tree in Chile, and then artemisinin, which you probably more known as coartem, and that comes from a plant called Artemisia annua in China. So these are first-line treatments for treatment of malaria. However, the disease is still out there. People are still dying from it. There's still very high levels of mortality, infections, and the disease has not been eradicated. And that's why a lot of our research now is focusing on not just treating the disease, but eradicating it. So in a way, you could say some of the work we've done, not just is looking at treating the disease, but in a way, we've also shown how some of these ingredients that we've got from the plant can eradicate the disease.
Now, let's get to the study. I mean, what was some of the? It must have taken a lot of head work, a lot of time to get through a study like this, right? So
the goal of our project is to explore South Africa's biodiversity. So we've got something like 24,000 plant species. And as I said, the potential is great if you can actually get some of these to treat these diseases. So we set out ourselves a goal to actually explore all 24,000. So that's a huge task and can take a lifetime to do that. But we managed to get through some 11,000 plants that we collected. And through that process of what we call evaluation, so we extract these plants, 11,000 of them, and we store them. And then we evaluate for different diseases. So we then looked at a subset of the sample, something like 300 plants that we selected from this collection. And we evaluated in the laboratory to see two things, that whether it actually kills the parasite, Plas-modium falci-parum, and whether it also stops the transmission.
That's so
interesting. And that was actually what our discovery led to, where we discovered the specific plant, aloe malati, has ingredients or chemical compounds that can actually can potentially eradicate the disease.
And with eradicate, you mean completely change the game, the field of how malaria affects the world, Africa, South Africa?
So as I said, there are some fantastic treatments for malaria, artemisinin, coartem, chloroquine, and all the derivatives of that. So there are treatments out there, but the disease is still out there. It's still the number one killer and a huge disease burden to the continent. So eradicate really is about how do we go about stopping the disease.
Completely, yes.
Completely, yeah. So to understand that a bit better, let me just explain a bit of the life cycle of the parasite.
Please, yes.
So it literally starts with the very painful experience that one has with a mosquito bite.
Yes.
It's a female mosquito that actually does the transmission and actually carries the parasite. It bites a human, and then in that process takes a blood meal. But in that process, the mosquito carries the parasite and infects the human. So the parasite gets into the bloodstream and then moves and moves into the body of the human. It then moves into what we call the liver stages of the parasite, and moves into the liver, and it's at that point where the parasite causes severe disease.
Yes.
All the symptoms that one actually observes in malaria, and untreated actually then results in death. And the big challenge is actually getting treatments on time, especially in children.
Yes.
And in some of the rural parts to actually get that treatment. So if you get the treatment, so that does kill the parasite, and then people do recover. However, the parasite does something else. It does go into the bone marrow, and once it gets into the bone marrow, it then re-emerges into the blood and forms what you call the sexual phases of the parasite.
Yeah.
So it produces what we call male and female, and in scientific terminology, we call that gametocytes. And these gametocytes are then the sexual phases, and they can then now start making another parasite. But what happens is the next mosquito comes along and then takes another blood meal. And in that second bite, takes the second blood meal, it then sucks up these gametocytes, or the male and female gametocytes, and then it now carries the parasite again. And then it goes to the next person and bites the next person, takes another blood meal, and then reinfects them with the parasite again.
It's a vicious
cycle. So that process is called transmission. So a lot of research, and the research we have done, is to show how these natural compounds that we've got from the plants are able to stop that transmission, to prevent the gametocytes, the male and female sexual stages of the parasite, to stop that from growing. So when a mosquito takes its second blood meal, it does not take up.
It doesn't.
That is what we focus.
In your experience, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to malaria?
So misconceptions is the fact that I would say if you go to a malaria endemic area, is that not taking any forms of protection. It's not a misconception, but can result in getting infected.
Yeah.
So the common ones are taking your prophylactics, the treatments that you actually have
beforehand.
But the other one is your mosquito repellents. So your mosquito repellents, and I think this is the misconception that some people may actually have. Mosquito repellent is actually only preventing the mosquito from taking a blood meal. It is not preventing the transmission of the disease. So while the mosquito repellent can actually be applied, it has a limited lifetime on the skin. So it may last only a certain time. And then sometimes you would actually go and wash your body and wash your hands. And you wash off the repellent, and then the mosquito can return and bite. And I think that maybe the misconception there is that if you take apply a mosquito repellent, you won't get infected with the parasite.
Do you think that this study, and if it's successful, that it can actually start a massive positive wave when it comes to, when we look at the effect of malaria in South Africa, in Africa, it causes quite a lot of problems. Do you think this is the beginning of the first good positive step?
So most of the historical research has been done is to treat the disease, especially at the liver stages. So the groundbreaking stuff that we're kind of doing, or research we're doing now, and what we've discovered is the fact that we can actually prevent the mosquito carrying the parasite from one host to another, to another person. So that is quite groundbreaking. The next phase is basically this: how do we get this to be ultimately used on the market or used by people? And that requires the most important part of the study is actually requiring clinical studies. So it needs to be done and moved into clinical studies. But prior to that, we are going to moving it into safety studies. So we have to show that it is safe. And if it's safe, typically in animal studies and in the laboratory, we then are permitted to actually move it into the clinic and test into humans. The challenges around that is when you go into the clinic and test in humans, it's quite a costly exercise.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So huge amounts of funding actually needs to be raised, and that's the process we've initiated to actually raise funding to be able to move it into the clinical studies. And based on the clinical studies, and ultimately, we then hope you can actually get it commercialized and registered for treatment of malaria.
Prof, we've got around 2 minutes left. I just want to hear from you. Why do you believe more should be done in the study and the research when it comes to specifically something like malaria? Why should more be done?
So in South Africa, I'll speak from a South African perspective, and I'm actually involved in natural products. And more needs to be done is because we have such great potential. And the potential is huge in terms of, we know the statistics as to what natural products can offer to treating diseases. So we need to invest more, we need to spend more time and more research effort in exploring our natural products and how they can be used. And in fact, if you also look at a rich culture of the country, if you find a lot of our plants are used culturally for treatment of diseases. You know, you have your traditional health, medical practices, your Buddha route, all of that still uses many of these natural products for treatment of diseases. But what seems to be lacking is scientific study and research that actually substantiates the use that ultimately can be used on a regulated and approved basis. So you can go to your local pharmacy and buy some of these herbal medicines, but not just buy them, but buy them with scientific data that substantiates their use.
Yeah, that's very important. I think that's probably the most important part of the process. My final question, and I always like asking this, especially when a big study was done, is there some of the results of something that came out of the study that even surprised you? So
I've been involved in this type of research for many, many years. We call it bioprospecting type of research. So in terms of the results we get, I'm not at all surprised. Because natural products actually offer, and have always been doing this in terms of coming up as great treatments for diseases. But what was surprising is the fact that a new and novel method of trying to eradicate the disease. The very first time we actually did it on a natural product, it seemed to work. That was surprising. So we call these hit rates. So the potential or the possibility of it working was surprising. The fact that it actually happened very quickly.
Well, Prof, we're going to have to continue this chat, and I'm so proud of you and well done. And I really hope that the study sees and gets what it deserves. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you very much.